If I told you that a brand new version of a pure electric car had pretty much the same range as the old version, had a lower peak charging speed, was a bit fatter, and looked a lot weirder than the other version, you'd probably think it was doomed, right? Well, all of those things could be said to be true about the brand new Kia Niro EV, but the headlines, they do not always tell the whole story. So here I am, your intrepid reporter for Electrifying.com, about to give you the full lowdown. So let's go.
But before I get to the nitty-gritty of a proper drive of the new Niro EV on UK roads, please do give us your first impressions in the comments. Has the Niro transformed from ugly duckling to beautiful swan, or has it just had an embarrassing midlife crisis?
This is the brand new Kia Niro EV, the car previously known as the Kia eNiro. It's a very small name change, quite a big difference, not least in the way it looks. Now, Ginny previously met this car in a studio and was kind of slightly concerned that it had gone a bit too far in trying to shed its previously frumpy image. Gone is the slightly froggy face of the last one, and in is a much more technical looking, much more aggressive front end. It's got this kind of chunky monobrow along the top and then low mounted headlights and a big wide gaping mouth. It's certainly got more attitude than before. And Kia, believe it or not, calls this tiger face. Grr. Along the sides, there's some contrast coloured plastic which starts just here in front of the front wheel and ends just before the rear wheel. And you can have that in one of 3 different colours, by the way. And then the bit that everybody talks about, these big sort of whacking side blades. Now, I have to say, they do remind me slightly of an Audi R8. If I squint and have taken a lot of drugs. Now, Ginny wasn't sure, but having now seen it in the metal, although that is plastic, I actually really love it. It makes the Niro EV not boring, and not boring is good. Also, they are not just for show, because they actually house these wicked big boomerang rear lights, and they are technically flying buttresses, because there's a gap here that helps smooth the airflow around the back of the car and make it more slippery. I'm impressed. Also, they only come in contrast silvery grey or black if you pay £150. So otherwise, they're body colour, which makes your Niro EV stand out a little bit less.
I'm not arguing that it looks fresher and more modern than it did before, but the eNiro's conservative looks were probably something that appealed to a good few people, and it's not so conservative now. It's also a bit bigger than it was with a longer wheelbase. You don't notice so much from the outside,
but it's back here where tall people will really appreciate the difference, because it's the back seats where the extra space has landed. I'm about 6 foot tall, and this is me sat behind my own driving position, and I've got good headroom, good knee room. And in fact, these front seats are actually slightly thinner so that I have that extra knee room. And I need that because I'm tall. Also, one thing that I really appreciate, if you look in the back of the front seats, there's a couple of little USB-C ports. That's good for people who game while on the move. There's also a bigger boot. It's up by a little bit over the old one, although not by much. It's also now got a frunk, which the old one didn't have at all. Okay, so it is a little bit bijou, but at least you can store your charging cables away from the rest of your luggage. Although, I would like to point out that I have never stored my charging cables that neatly in my entire life.
But to be honest, there's only one place I'm really interested in being. No, not Barbados, the driver's seat.
First things first, this does feel a hell of a lot more modern than the eNiro ever did. For a start, this big swoop of digital dash kind of reminds me of the Kia EV6, which is in no way a bad thing, and you do get the same sort of pair of 10.25-inch screens up in front of you. Now, it's worth remembering that in the lowest grade of this car, you only get an 8-inch version on this side, which does look a little bit odd in this big sweep of dash. But other than that, it looks quite nice. And then there's a set of oft-used buttons on this bar underneath with the aircon controls. Down here, we've got heated seats, heated steering wheel, the usual stuff. The one thing I keep thinking is, the Niro EV hasn't forgotten what useful looks like. So it's got a USB-C, it's got a USB, it's got a 12-volt output, a wireless charging pad. Now, some of these things come as options on the higher grades, but it's got some really nice sort of interesting shapes on it. I particularly like this bit in here, and it's lit in there, so that's quite interesting. This car feels very nicely put together. The materials quality is good. The dash is all soft touch. It's got lovely details. This has taken what was a fairly boring plasticky eNiro and taken it right into the 21st century. It feels really sorted. Apart from the fact that these leather seats, which aren't really leather, feel a bit weird. Now that might be because they're actually made of recycled material sourced from eucalyptus trees. There is, however, really good news on the driving front because the new Niro feels like it's really evolved once you start moving. Why? Well, it just feels a bit more grown up. It's still got the same 201 brake horsepower motor as the old one. It's been softened off and made more friendly, smoother. The other one felt a little bit aggressive and jerky for a 5-seat SUV, and this one just feels a little bit more mature. When you pull away, it doesn't sort of leap about and scrabble its front wheels like the old version. It's also quieter, listen, with more supple suspension. Okay, so it's not night and day over the eNiro, but this is a car that feels like it's basically gone to finishing school and ended up with better manners and nicer posture. It's not perfect, it still will thump a little bit over bigger lumps and bumps, but the faster you go, the better it gets. And generally, it's just got a nice feeling of calm and serenity. The body control's good, the steering's good, the brakes are good. That's a good thing for a family SUV, surely. And I'm liking the fact that we still get 3 different drive modes, just like in the old eNiro. So there's a little drive mode button down here, and you can go from eco to make the most of your range, into normal, which is basically what I drive in mostly, and sport, which makes the car just that little bit more responsive. Although it's not a sports car, it does help you feel like you're getting a little bit more energy out of the battery. It's fun, but I wouldn't drive it round in sport. Eco's more my thing. It's quite soft, quite gentle. And also it's got wonderful Kia brake regeneration accessed via these paddles behind the steering wheel. So if I'm approaching a roundabout, it's like changing down a gear in a manual gearbox with a normal internal combustion engine. So you pull the left-hand one and you can feel the brake regeneration increasing, clawing that energy that's lost during braking and putting it back into the battery. And then when you come away, you can decrease it with the right-hand paddle. It's really useful. It's very intuitive once you're used to it. Something has changed because this is slightly more firm than it was in the eNiro, which makes it a better one-pedal drive car. It always feels good to have very positive brake regeneration because it's one of the best things about having an EV, in my opinion. It just makes you feel like you're clawing back as much of the energy possible that's usually lost during braking to put back into the battery. And it means this car will be as efficient as possible. What's that? Oh, it does like to do bing bongs whenever it thinks you're not slap bang in the middle of your lane, which is a little bit annoying if you drive in the countryside a lot because you basically never are slap bang in the middle of your lane. It's really hard sometimes not to see an electric car through the prism of your own use, and this is the kind of thing that would fit into my family really, really well. It's not a scary electric car, it's not full of gimmicks that make you think you're driving a spaceship. One thing to remember though, the Niro EV isn't a bespoke electric car, so there will be hybrid and plug-in hybrid Niros knocking around on the roads. So that means it's never going to be quite as complete at being a pure electric car as it could have been. But you know what, it gets pretty close, and that's a massive compliment. All in all, I have to say that this is exactly what I was hoping for. It's a more mature, more resolved electric Niro. It's got all of the sharp edges knocked off without losing sight of what this car is actually going to be used for. It's gone very dark, by the way, because there's lots of trees. So it's like driving down a green tunnel, which is handy because we're not killing the trees as we're driving past them. We're killing them somewhere else where the power station is that produces the electricity. That's a joke, by the way.
Yeah. Underneath is a fractionally larger battery than the old car at 64.8 kilowatt hours, so not a massive jump, and a slightly slower DC fast charging system of 72 kilowatts. The old version managed 77. But all is not as it seems, because the new Niro's electronics are more efficient. The new Niro can charge at a higher speed for longer. As a result, a 10 to 80% charge will take around 9 minutes less than the old car at about 43 minutes. All cars should have an 11 kilowatt AC charger on board too, but home charging will take about 10 hours on a normal 7 kilowatt wall box. And the range is up slightly too. Kia claims a jump of only 4 to 5 miles at 287 miles WLTP, but we know how good Kias are at energy efficiency. And with a new sat-nav-based battery heating system that preconditions the pack prior to charging, we'd expect that to translate to a solid 240 to 250 miles of real-world ability. That's a useful amount. And speaking of cost, the Niro EV will start at £34,995 for the 2 model, so no government grant, with the 3 costing £37,745 up to £44,995 if you want a flagship 4 model like this one, with the fancy options like remote smart parking assist that allows you to park the car with the key, highway driver assist and forward collision avoidance, as well as a load of other advanced driving assistance systems. Vehicle to load that makes it possible to run household appliances from the car is standard on the 3 and 4, and an efficiency aiding heat pump is optional. That seems about right in pricing, although as ever not exactly cheap, but Kia needs to get this car on point. Over the course of 2021, it increased sales in Europe by more than 20% as a brand, and at some points nearly half the cars it sold were electrified, so a good Niro EV is vital to Kia's success.
Well, now I have driven it, and you know what? I actually really love it. I even dig the side blades, although you do have to be a little bit careful which colourways you go for, or you can end up with a bit of a mishmash. But there is no doubt that what Kia has done to this car has made it a really rounded vehicle. In fact, everything that company's done has made it more desirable, more functional, more practical than the car that went before it. On paper, it might look like it's stayed still or gone backwards slightly, but it really hasn't. And the thing is, once you wind in that monster 7-year Kia warranty, things are looking decidedly rosy. So Kia eNiro to Niro EV, there may have been changes, but this remains an electrifying.com favourite.
If you want to know more about any of Kia's other pure electric models or any of the Niro EV's competition, please do log on to electrifying.com, where we'll help you pick the right electric car for you and even help you buy one when you've decided.